Have you ever seen a creature so broken it stopped believing it even deserved to be saved? In the back corner of a noisy shelter, away from wagging tails and hopeful eyes, one German shepherd sat completely still. No barking, no growling, just silence. He didn't flinch when people passed. He didn't look up when food was placed near him. He had given up. Days turned into weeks. Families came and went. And he stayed in that same cold corner, invisible to the world. No one knew what had happened to him. No one even asked, until one man walked in, not looking for a dog, not expecting a miracle, and everything changed. They named him Shadow, not because he followed anyone, but because he didn't. He stayed in the shadows always, like he wanted to disappear. When Shadow was first brought into the shelter, no one could touch him. The staff found him wandering near a construction site, skin clinging to bone, patches of fur missing, and eyes that looked like they hadn't seen kindness in years. He didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't even growl. Just sat there, curled in on himself, staring at the wall. They placed him in the quietest corner of the shelter, away from the noisy dogs who begged for attention. Every morning, food was slid into his crate. Most days, it stayed untouched for hours. He didn't care. Volunteers tried. Some brought treats. Some knelt beside him, whispering soft words. But nothing worked. Whenever someone got too close, Shadow would tremble violently, like he was expecting pain. The kind of trembling that tells you this isn't fear of the unknown. It's memory. Other dogs came and went. Puppies were scooped up in minutes. Even older dogs found homes eventually. But Shadow? He stayed. Weeks passed, then months. And in that time, the staff began saying things like, maybe he's too far gone. He just doesn't want help. Some dogs never bounced back. But they were wrong. Because even in his silence, Shadow was watching, listening. You could see if you looked long enough. Not in his body, but in his eyes. Somewhere, buried deep behind the fear, was a flicker. A question. Will this person hurt me too? And the truth was, none of them knew the answer. Because no one knew what had been done to him before he got here. But then, one rainy Tuesday, just when the shelter had begun talking about transferring him to a long-term kennel, someone walked in. Not someone looking for a dog. Not someone who even said much at all. Just a man. Quiet. Distant. Heavy, like he was carrying something unseen. And Shadow, who never reacted to anything, lifted his head. Just for a moment. But it was the first time. The man's name was Daniel. He didn't smile. Didn't crouch down or call out like most visitors did. He just stood there, soaked from the rain, his eyes locked on the trembling figure curled in the corner. The shelter worker offered to show him other dogs, friendlier ones, easier ones. But Daniel simply said, no, that one. He wasn't allowed to adopt Shadow right away. No one was. Too unpredictable. Too shut down. But Daniel asked if he could just sit by the kennel. No pressure. No touching. Just be there. And so, he came back the next day. And the day after that. And the day after that. At first, Shadow didn't move. Not even a glance at him. But Daniel didn't try to force a connection. He simply sat on the cold floor, quietly, every afternoon at 3 p.m. Sometimes he spoke. Softly. Almost like he was speaking more to himself than to the dog. He used to sit like that too. Same way. After the chemo, he always wanted a German Shepherd. So they were brave, smarter than people. I should have listened to him more. No one knew what Daniel meant. Not the volunteers, not the staff. But the grief in his voice said more than his words ever could. And one day, Shadow turned his head. Just slightly. Barely even noticeable. But Daniel saw it. Didn't react. Didn't move. Just kept talking. That night, the shelter workers stayed a little longer. One of them, Maya, whispered to a colleague. Maybe he remembers something. Something good. But no one really knew. The only thing anyone agreed on was this. Shadow wasn't born like this. Something happened to him. There had been scars, small, circular ones, almost like burns. The vet said his back leg had healed from an old fracture, poorly set. His teeth were chipped, and his tail had a permanent crook at the end. But the real damage wasn't physical. It was in how he flinched at raised voices, how he shrank into himself when a mop clattered to the ground, how his eyes darted around whenever the lights flickered. Someone had hurt him, badly, and yet he wasn't violent. He never snapped, never growled. He just endured. Daniel understood that look, the look of someone who'd stopped expecting kindness. Because he wore it too. And for reasons even he couldn't explain, Daniel kept showing up. He brought an old flannel blanket one day, left it folded near the gate. Shadow didn't touch it at first, but by the next morning, he was lying on it. It wasn't much, but it was the first time the cold floor wasn't his only option, and that somehow meant everything. It started with something small, so small, the cameras almost missed it. One afternoon, after Daniel left his usual spot near Shadow's kennel, the dog stood up. For the first time in weeks, he stood. Not for food, not for fear, but to watch Daniel walk away. The next day, Shadow didn't retreat to the farthest corner when Daniel arrived. He stayed on the blanket, eyes open, ears flicking with each step, still cautious, still unsure, but curious. Daniel noticed. He didn't smile, he never did, but his shoulders eased just a little. He sat as usual, cross-legged, hands in his lap. After a while, he whispered, "It's okay if you don't trust me yet. I'm not sure I trust myself either these days." A pause. "But I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that." And he was. Over the next few days, something began to shift. Shadow's body loosened. His breathing softened. And then, one quiet Thursday, he took a single step forward. It wasn't much, just a paw's length. But Daniel saw it. He didn't move, didn't reach out. He just let it happen. Shadow didn't come closer that day, or the next. But on Sunday, he walked all the way to the front of the kennel and sat, 2 feet from Daniel. Just sat, staring through the bars. Daniel's voice cracked when he spoke. "Hey, buddy." That was it. Just 2 words. But they hung in the air like something sacred. The shelter staff took notice. Maya, the volunteer, started documenting it. "He doesn't shake anymore when Daniel's around," she said. "He's calm, like he finally found something familiar." And that's when the paperwork began. Daniel hadn't officially asked to adopt Shadow, but everyone knew. He wasn't visiting anymore. He was returning. The day of the adoption was quiet. There were no balloons, no celebración, just Daniel standing at the front desk, filling out forms with a shaking hand. Shadow stood beside him on a leash, still tense, but not resisting, not hiding. As Daniel signed the last page, Maya leaned over and asked softly, "Why him?" Daniel didn't look up, just stared at the papers. Then he said, almost to himself, "Because I know what it's like to be alive, but not really living." They didn't ask anything else. When they left the shelter together, Shadow hesitated at the exit. The doors opened automatically, and the world outside looked so big. But Daniel paused, looked down, and whispered, "It's okay. I'm scared too." And with that, Shadow walked forward, for the first time, towards something instead of away. Shadow didn't adjust overnight. He didn't leap onto couches or wag his tail when Daniel came home. There were no playful barks or licks. No Hollywood moment. Just silence. But it wasn't the same kind of silence anymore. This one had room in it. Room to grow. Daniel gave him space. The house was quiet, just the way both of them seemed to prefer. The food bowl was filled on time. A soft bed waited in the corner. And Daniel never forced a thing. But every night, before turning off the lights, he'd whisper, "You're safe now." At first, Shadow slept with one eye open. Body curled, muscles tense, always facing the door. But after a few weeks, something changed. Daniel woke up one morning to find Shadow lying at the foot of his bed. Not shaking, not watching, just sleeping. And for Daniel, that moment hit harder than he expected. It had been over a year since his son passed. 12 months of walking through a house that felt like a museum. Everything frozen in time. His son's drawings still on the fridge, his shoes by the door, his room untouched. His son had always begged for a dog, specifically a German Shepherd. "They're smart, Dad. They'll protect you if I can't." Daniel used to laugh it off. You're not going anywhere, buddy. But then cancer. Fast, cruel, unforgiving. And just like that, Daniel was left with silence. He wasn't looking for a dog that day at the shelter. He was just driving, trying to outrun the weight on his chest. But something had pulled him there. Something had told him to stop. And now, every day, that weight felt just a little lighter. Not because Shadow fixed it, but because, somehow, Shadow understood it. They took walks together, short at first. Shadow stayed close, never pulling, always watching Daniel's movements. People commented on how well-trained he was. But he wasn't trained. He was just connected. Daniel started reading again, started opening windows, started breathing. One afternoon, while cleaning the house, he came across an old notebook tucked behind his son's dresser. He hadn't had the strength to go into that room for months. But now, with Shadow lying nearby, he found the courage. Inside the notebook was a page written in messy handwriting. A note his son had scribbled months before the end. If anything happens to me, promise me you'll get a dog. Not just any dog, a German Shepherd. They'll keep you safe when I'm not there. Daniel sat on the floor, notebook trembling in his hands. And Shadow, almost as if he knew, walked over and rested his head on Daniel's knee. That was the first time Daniel cried in front of him. Not because he was broken, but because for the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't alone. After finding the journal note, something shifted inside Daniel. Not all at once, not dramatically, but like thawing ice, slow, quiet, unstoppable. He started spending more time in his son's room, not to grieve, but to remember. Shadow followed him every time, not out of curiosity, out of something deeper, loyalty maybe, or instinct. He never disturbed anything, just sat by the door, watching. One afternoon, as Daniel was cleaning out an old cabinet, Shadow began acting strangely. Not aggressive, not anxious, but focused. He sniffed the base of the cabinet, then pressed his nose against the wall behind it. He whined, once, low and sharp. Daniel paused. What is it, boy? Shadow's eyes didn't leave the wall. He pressed again, pawing gently. Daniel moved the cabinet aside. Behind it, wedged between the wall and a wooden support beam, was a small cardboard box. Dusty, forgotten. Daniel's hands shook as he pulled it out. Inside were a few of his son's things, a plastic flashlight, an action figure, a folded drawing. And beneath that another notebook, smaller, thinner, with a rubber band keeping it shut. He opened it carefully. The first page held a message scrawled in blue marker. For Dad, in case you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. Daniel stopped breathing. The pages that followed were short entries. Thoughts from his son, written during hospital stays, late nights, quiet moments. But one page stood out. A sketch. A German Shepherd. Big ears, alert eyes, and under it a caption. This is the dog I'll send you if I have to go. He'll look scared. He'll need time. But he's good. He'll protect you when I can't. Daniel dropped the notebook. He turned to look at Shadow. The dog was watching him, head tilted slightly, as if waiting for something. And that's when Daniel felt it. Not a chill, not a memory. Something bigger. Like fate had been planning this all along. Like his son had sent this dog not just to be rescued, but to rescue him. Tears blurred his vision as he knelt beside Shadow. You're not just a good boy, he whispered, voice cracking. You're his boy, aren't you? Shadow leaned into him. No trembling, no fear, just quiet understanding. And in that moment, Daniel stopped seeing a broken dog and started seeing a miracle. Shadow didn't just recover, he transformed. He no longer curled in corners or flinched at sudden sounds. He began to run, not just walk beside Daniel, but run across open fields through crisp morning air, tail high and ears perked. He learned to play again, to bark, to chase sticks, to rest his head in Daniel's lap without fear of being hurt. Daniel changed too. He opened the curtains, started cooking again. He even moved his son's drawings from the fridge to new frames on the wall. No longer signs of grief, but celebrations of love. Neighbors who once whispered about the sad man in the gray house now smiled when they saw him. Walking with Shadow, laughing quietly, nodding to passers-by. And Shadow, once considered unadoptable, became something of a legend in their town. The dog who never barked, now the one who comforted crying children, waited patiently beside elderly neighbors, and followed Daniel with unwavering loyalty. Maya from a shelter visited once. She stood on the porch, watching Shadow rest peacefully by Daniel's feet. "He looks happy," she said softly. Daniel just nodded. "So do I." But the greatest moment came one quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon. Daniel stood in the doorway of his son's room, now a place filled with warmth, light, and peace. Shadow walked in ahead of him, lay down beneath the window, and closed his eyes. Daniel whispered. "He kept his promise. You know that, right? He sent me the dog, the one who'd protect me when you couldn't." There was no answer, of course, just a gentle breeze through the window and the soft sound of Shadow's breathing. But somehow it felt like enough. Sometimes, the most broken souls are the ones who carry the greatest light. And sometimes, when we think we're rescuing someone else, we discover they were sent to rescue us. Because love doesn't end when life does. It lingers. It finds a way, even if it comes in the form of a frightened dog hiding in a corner, waiting for the right heart to come along.